from the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Oh my, we're getting right down to it here. People are already voting in some states. And recording this, I gotta say this these days because news moves so quickly. I'm recording this on Wednesday the 16th, so 3 weeks from yesterday is Election Day. Speaking of dates here, the swing states, and you know who you are: Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, my beloved Wisconsin. Registering to vote, already too late in Arizona. I hope you did it. Hopefully you've registered. Nevada, the good news for you is October 8th was your deadline, but there's also same-day registration at the polls in Nevada. That's the good news. So if you're not registered, all is not lost. You can register at the polls. Take an overabundance of what you think you might need. Take a utility bill to prove your residence. Take a lease for your house. I don't know, a rental agreement for your apartment. Take your birth certificate. Take your driver's license. For sure, they're going to want that. If you have a state ID, if you have a passport, just whatever you got, put them in a little satchel. Take everything you think you might possibly need and register at the polls, those of you in Nevada. Georgia, your deadline was October 7th. North Carolina, same deal for you. Deadline was October 11th. Pennsylvania, okay, maybe you're the most important note I have here. October 21st. I'm recording this on October 16th. Depending on when you hear this, if you hear it right away, you only have a few days. Again, depending on when you hear this, you may only have a matter of hours. So Pennsylvania, get on the ball. October 21st, there's no same-day registration at the polls for you. October 21, same date for Michigan, but you also have same day at the poll registration. So one way or the other. And Wisconsin, today, as I speak, October 16th is the deadline. And same day at the poll registration. So good news for Michigan and Wisconsin, same day at the polls. Pennsylvania, you still have time. October 21. Get yourself registered if you're not. All right, let's take care of some news items. The Nobel Prize in Economics has been awarded to 3 economists. I have a very hard time taking economists seriously at all. What a weird pseudoscience economics is. But here's the Nobel Prize in Economics awarded to a trio for explaining why some nations are rich and others poor. I wonder why some nations are rich and others are poor. Could we just think about that for a minute and try to imagine why? Well, these 3 came up with an answer for us. They basically came up with the idea that societies with poor rule of law and institutions that exploit the population do not generate growth or change for the better. Well, how in the world did that happen? Well, as they explain, when Europeans colonized large parts of the globe, the institutions in those societies changed, the committee said, citing the economist's work. That's the Nobel Committee. While in many places this was aimed at exploiting the indigenous population, in other places it laid the foundations for inclusive political and economic systems. So in other words, rich nations that exploited poor nations created poor nations and rich nations. Gee, whoever would have thought, whoever would have imagined that rich nations colonizing and exploiting poor nations would result in those nations remaining poor generations to come. Exploited labor and genocide against indigenous populations and slavery and extracting natural resources, the rape and pillage of peoples and land, setting up institutions that benefit the corporations of the home country, as the banana growers did in Central America and the diamond and gold miners in Africa, and name your industry and name your poor country. So, yeah, Nobel Prize for Economics. Poor countries are poor because rich countries invaded, colonized, and exploited them. Wow. Brilliant. Tell us more, Dr. Obvious. You know me, I have a great respect for scholarship, for academia. I'm sure there's more to their research, and I'm sure I'm giving it short shrift, but the headline is just laughably dumb. I mean, it's true. Thanks for coming up with the right answer. Now maybe you could tell me what color the sky is and what color the grass is, because I really want to know. And so maybe your research can tell me that. Then what color is the sky? Thanks. Thanks for that. And you'll get the Nobel Prize next year. A trio of scientists are given the Nobel Prize for Science for telling us that the sky is blue and the grass is green. Thanks, Dr. Obvious. Speaking of science, I'm sure you saw this week the big SpaceX capture of the big old rocket that came back to the Earth's surface and was caught in this big sort of Tinker Toy catcher. Very impressive, I guess. Nothing surprises me anymore technologically. I guess my bottom line is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I still have to be convinced. So do your best to convince me why anybody should care about this. To me, it's a huge, colossal waste of money, time, and energy that could be put to other things. Is it my is it my disdain for Elon Musk is coloring my opinion? Maybe. But Israel, holy hell. Okay, it's just every week. My God. Over 40 countries strongly condemned their attack on UN peacekeepers. Yes, you heard that right. They're attacking UN peacekeepers now in Lebanon. Okay. I read something I didn't know. They're running the same playbook in Lebanon as they are in the West Bank. Settlements. Apparently there are new Israeli settlements in southern Lebanon, a whole damn different country. Israeli settlements in southern Lebanon, and they're advertising these things. They're building them. They're taking over cities in southern Lebanon. They're kicking out people who live there. They're building their own little cities. They're renaming them. And then they're advertising, come live in our new settlement. This is the only way to have a truly secure Israel, is what they say. This is how you have a secure Israel, by literally invading and occupying permanent occupation of another sovereign country on your border, on their side of the border that you share. So that's what Israel is doing now. You may have known this before. This was news to me. Yeah, West Bank type settlements now in Lebanon. So Israel is just a rogue state. They're just a thug rogue state right now. It's been discovered, as though this hasn't come up before, but new evidence, recent evidence that over the last several weeks, Israel has been withholding aid, food aid, into Gaza. And U.S. law prohibits weapon sales to nations that withhold aid. Israel has just gone way off the deep end. Way off the deep end. I don't know how. Well, I do know how. I don't know when. We solve this. I'll say it every week until it happens. We got to cut them off just at the knees. Zero cover. Zero money, zero diplomatic cover, zero weapons, zero nothing. Cut them off. We have to absolutely cut Israel loose. And we have to join with the World Court. We have to join with the United Nations and tell Israel that, no, we're all done with you. You are just entirely on your own, and we condemn you in no uncertain terms. That's just all there is to that. Supreme Court is back in session, of course, the first Monday of October, as we know from the Walter Matthau movie. Is that a Walter Matthau movie? Look that up. haven't made any real big news yet. They're keeping their schedule kind of light intentionally because they're anticipating the fact that they're going to get a flood of election-related cases, and they will. The lower courts are already jam-packed. The Republicans are hard at work, working the courts to try to suppress the vote. Democrats are already challenging the Georgia Election Commission for the hijinks they're trying to create. And the Democrats are hard at work prepping for whatever comes down the pipe here because it's going to be a lot. SCOTUS did make some news on a couple of cases they decided not to hear, the Texas abortion law and the Alabama IVF law. Of course, Texas has a very severe abortion law. A doctor literally can't treat a woman who's having a complicated pregnancy unless she's literally at death's door. She has to be at the brink of death before a doctor can treat the woman, or that doctor is risking 99 years in jail. I mean, that's how serious this is. So it's very serious, and SCOTUS said, "No, it sounds okay to us. That's fine. We don't need to hear that case. We'll just let that one stand." And they did the same thing with Alabama IVF. Of course, you know that one, when an Alabama court decided that a fertilized egg is a person, and therefore IVF is illegit, can't do it. SCOTUS said, "Nah, sounds okay to us. All right, no problem." So SCOTUS is in session, but that's where they're at right now. New lows. This is a weekly feature here. Of course, the Orange Menace, you all saw the very odd rally in Pennsylvania where he danced for 39 minutes. That was so... If you haven't seen it, just Google that up and watch it. Man, holy hell. That was weird as... I'm telling you. If you don't know the story, it was supposed to be a town hall. Kristi Noem, governor of one of the Dakotas, I think South, was his little friend on stage to moderate and ask the questions. Yeah, it was supposed to be a town hall. He took 4 or 5 questions. On some reports, I heard 4, and other reports, I heard 5. And it was warm. It was hot and stuffy in the hall, and somebody fainted, I guess, required medical attention. So they played a song while they waited, and then somebody else. So these 2 people, they both turned out to be fine. They needed attention because they fainted. But then there were still 39 minutes to go in the hour, and the Orange Menace decides, you know what? Forget it. Who wants to hear questions, he said. Let's just play some more music. And he kept yelling at his guys off stage. And by the way, just a little side note, he's talking to him with such disrespect. He's like yelling at him. Telling him what songs to play. He plays like DJ. And it was the weirdest collection of music. Starts with Ave Maria. At one point he goes to, who was it? Rufus Wainwright? Or was it Loudon Wainwright? Who's the older one? There's the dad and there's the son. Anyway, I forget. The one who had the famous version of Hallelujah. Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Played that, which, by the way, Wainwright sent a cease and desist order, which we've talked about. And the Elvis trilogy, his Truth Is Marching On thing. And he just stood up on stage very awkwardly, kind of swaying and sort of doing his 2-fisted little fist pump, like he's doing the shaker, the weight shake. Remember that? So bizarre. I mean... Again, this is in my new low section because it was the weirdest thing I've seen him do, and he's done lots of weird things. And several commentators have pointed out, and I'd like to share this as well. They said, now just imagine, just close your eyes and imagine for a second that either Kamala Harris or Joe Biden had done that exact same thing. Imagine what the critics would say. Forget about the critics, just the media, all the media. Imagine what they'd say. They would lose their minds. But with the Orange Menace, it's just a funny little story. They're covering the Orange Menace in such a bizarre way where what's the term that people have used? Sane washing. I mean, most of them do really come right out and say, well, he lied about this, he lied about that. But it's all just very... Well, what happened today? It's just what happens every day. If the legacy media was really being fair in the original sense of the word, they would make it very clear that he's out of his mind and that he's fascist to the core, as was that a General Milley quote to Bob Woodward in his latest book? Yeah, they report these things, but they're not, if you're old enough to remember newspaper headlines, it would be above the fold, right? Of course, the big story above the fold, meaning the top half of the front page, and the font size mattered. Man lands on moon, World Trade Center attacked. There are big headlines, large fonts above the fold. Well, the Orange Menace saying that he wants to use the military against U.S. civilians, American citizens, that should be a pretty big font above the fold. That's almost, that's getting close to 9/11 type headlines. We have a fascist, full-blown fascist to the core, according to General Milley, the head of the Joint Chiefs, the most dangerous person in America, fascist to the core. Yeah, that requires a 9/11 type headline and whatever that equivalent is in digital media. But it didn't happen. No, it didn't. People talked about it, but not really different in degree from what the headline was the day before and the day after. So, Orange Menace, new lows. American cities are now war zones. Again, the category is new lows. He's going lower and lower and lower every damn week. It's hard to imagine where he still has room to go, but every week he finds a way to dig deeper. And this week is that American cities are war zones. They've been invaded. They've been conquered by an army of immigrants. Are you noticing all my air quotes here? These are quotes. An army of immigrants, and not just an army invited by Kamala Harris, because he has to intentionally pronounce it wrong. Those of us who support his opponents, or those of us who oppose him politically, are scum, and most famously, the enemy within. The enemy within. And there again, military. He said that's the thing about these new lows. We as his opponents, and in this regard, I'm in allegiance with Kamala Harris and the Democrats, even though I'm not a Democrat, as you know perfectly well. So anybody who opposes him is now the enemy within, and he's perfectly willing and thinks maybe we should use the military. And again, we don't have to make up these things. He says them right out loud. You can just YouTube it. You can just listen to these words come right out of his mouth. Yeah, maybe we should use the military against this enemy within. Michael Flynn at an event, Michael Flynn, the old former general and certain to be in a Trump cabinet, if that came to be, God forbid. He was asked about that, and he pretty much agreed. What was his quote? Hell will be unleashed on political enemies. Yeah, Mark Milley, U.S. Army General, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says the current Republican presidential nominee is a fascist to the core, says no person has ever posed more of a danger to the United States, most dangerous person to this country. And we've talked about it before, we'll talk about it again, but if you just listen to the lefties from the beginning, your life will be a lot better, because we were warning you back in 1980 that we were on a steady road. You can't elect this guy. You can't elect Republicans. You're on a steady road to fascism and to totalitarianism. We were laughed at. We were mocked. But, of course, we were proven right. Steady line from Reagan, who busted unions, had no respect, to people like Pat Buchanan, racist bigots, to Newt Gingrich, the first one to really master the manipulation of the levers of government. He kind of started what Mitch McConnell perfected, just absolute manipulation of the levers of government to do unconstitutional things. And Newt Gingrich also was at the forefront of just lying about the opponents, coloring Democrats as radicals and communists, and just these ridiculous characterizations that were never true. And then from there, the line continues to the Rumsfelds and Cheneys, who go to the dark side and are in full allegiance and subservience to the fossil fuel industry, and war for oil and all of that. We get the Tea Party. We get the aforementioned Mitch McConnell, who just completely turns his back on the Constitution, denies Barack Obama judicial appointments. And then as this progress continues, now we have Sarah Palin, the first in a long line of nut jobs. And now there are so many that you can't even count, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Matt Gaetzes and all of them. And Trump himself. And Sarah Palin is kind of the godmother of the crazies. And now we got full-blown MAGA. And it's a steady line, and we knew it. We saw it coming, and we've been shouting it ever since. We've been yelling since 1980. We say, look at the progression of this. Look at the Republican Party. Look at the so-called conservatives. They call themselves conservatives. We call them right-wing. Look at the right wing. Look at the steady growing fascism. We were calling them neo-Nazis and neo-fascists for the last 40 years, and you guys didn't listen. Please listen to the lefties. We know what we're talking about. And now we come to the point where the worst manifestation of all of this, according to the polls anyway, is in a 50-50 race. The strength of the repugnance in the polls at this point now, after all these decades, it really says more about us than it says about them. This country, and it just pains me to say it, just objectively sucks. I mean, we can still save it. I still have hope. But we have to break this coalition of the evil and the dumb by reaching out. We got to make an effort to help the uneducated, the uninformed, people voting against their own interests. We have to help them understand where they're wrong. I know I don't know how. If I knew how, I'd do it. I keep trying. I know this much. We have to acknowledge their pain, because I can only imagine how sick these people are of hearing the Democrats tell them how great the economy is. I mean, I'm sick of hearing that. Yeah, by every metric, the economy is doing great. Except people's own personal lives, where they're just scraping by to make ends meet. They can't really live a decent life. They got to decide between medicine and food. They can't send their kids to college. They can't go on a decent vacation. They're just living paycheck to paycheck. They're getting by, but with no security. And then if something big happens, if a car breaks down, if there's a medical emergency, they are just screwed, and they know it. And they got the Democrats on TV telling them how great everything is. And then, God bless them, they turn to the Republicans. We got to figure out how to reach these people. And we got just a couple weeks to do it. But even then, we still have this job. It's a never-ending job. We got to help people understand that, yes, their lives are crummy, and we shouldn't be denying their own lived experience. We got to stop doing that. But at the same time, you can't be so goddamned ill-informed that you think the Republicans are the answer? These fascists? This wannabe strongman? These wannabe autocrats? These anti-democrats, small d? If they think that's the answer. So yeah, one, acknowledge their pain. But then two, you got to advocate for big changes. Which is why we got to talk about how disappointed we are in Kamala Harris. Just really, really leaning into this centrist BS and all the support she's getting from disaffected Republicans. Man, she's leaning into that. Rather than advocating for big changes that will actually make a difference in people's lives. It's all nibbling around the edges. And it's this Rube Goldberg stuff about tax incentives and just such BS. So 1, acknowledge the pain. 2, advocate for actual change, big change. Break the system, change the system kind of changes. And 3, then we have to mean it. We have to mean it and not just say it. And then we have to speak it clearly without all this political double talk and these talking points and the way politicians speak. You know, when they say that the Orange Menace is so honest and he speaks his mind, it's because he's the only person in the entire world of politics who doesn't talk like the other ones do. Kamala Harris is obviously intelligent, she's obviously well-spoken, but she speaks like every other politician we've heard for the last 100 years. There are 2 people in politics that I can think of, only 2, that speak clearly and passionately, and that's Bernie Sanders and the Orange Menace. And that's all people hear. They don't know he's lying or they don't care that he's lying. All they care about is that he's a straight shooter in the way that, you know, he speaks like, what was that movie with Warren Beatty, remember? About the politician, Bulworth, I think, was that what it was called? The politician who just speaks so bluntly that everybody is, their jaws hit the floor. They can't believe, and he becomes popular. So, yeah, check out the old movie Bulworth. That's the Orange Menace. But that's what they like. That and the fact that they're also, a lot of them are also bigots and they hate people and they're afraid of people, and he feeds all their worst fears and hatred and bigotry. You know, I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's all very complicated and multi-layered. But that's a big part of it. They're tired of being talked to like they're idiots and hearing all this Orwellian doublespeak that literally every politician is guilty of. And Kamala Harris is definitely guilty of political doublespeak all the time. And so they turn to the only alternative, because both parties have squashed any third-party alternative, whether it be libertarians or socialists or Greens or whoever. They've been silenced by the 2 major corporate parties. For those we're trying to reach, for those of us who think we have some answers, and we want to convince folks, we have to first acknowledge their pain. Second, we have to advocate for big actual change, reform, systemic reform, big break up the system kind of changes. No mealy-mouthed little nibbling around the edges. No, no, no. Number 3, we've got to mean it. We can't just say it. And number 4, then when we say it, we have to say it clearly without political doublespeak. Okay? Okay. So take that to your dinner table and continue the conversation with your loved ones. All right. Okay. So find this episode and all the others at charlesburcell.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. They're our flagship terrestrial station. Contact me, Charles Burcell at Gmail. Follow on Facebook. Thanks to Peter Donalds, who wrote and performed the theme song. All right, there you go. Love you. See ya.